It's time to optimize our fantasy football lineups, and we created an algorithm that does just that with our Start Sit tool that we call the Greenlight Start Sit tool. And this was basically created on some principles that we used last year when we were doing start sit tools. We were doing, okay, like what does the Vegas line say? So we're taking into account betting lines and what Vegas says. Vegas is pretty good at their jobs. They always make a lot of money, right? So we're taking a Vegas factor, right? What's the matchup like? So how many fantasy points does the opposing defense give up to that particular position? That's going to be one of the categories we look at. And then when you're looking at the overall offense and the red zone production and all of the efficiency metrics that you can, how high scoring is this offense? How efficient is this offense, especially at that position? We've got to score for that as well. And then the context score, and the context is going to be like, okay, for example, this week, the Colts haven't won in week 1 since 2013. That's something we'd give somebody a context bump for. And so when we're looking at this, we have it all in this model. Here's a screenshot of the model for you. And it basically tells us, okay, what kind of light does this person have? And obviously we have green light, yellow light, red light. Everybody's been to a stoplight before. But this is how we kind of look through every week. We can look through all of the players in fantasy football and see, okay, across multiple factors, this guy has a really good matchup. Across multiple factors, this guy has a really bad matchup. And so let's go through some guys that this week project pretty good. Let's start with Christian Watson, who has 3 green lights, and the context light, there's nothing here, so it's going to be neutral or green. This is a good matchup for Christian Watson. And this is a guy that you drafted at about picks 98 to 100. And so you're getting him anywhere from the 7th, 8th, 9th round, really. You are probably flexing Christian Watson. Christian Watson's a good flex this week. Last year, the Eagles gave up the most points of any team to wide receivers. And so, obviously, they brought in some help for cornerback this year. They brought in Cooper DeJean. They brought in Quinyon Mitchell. And so, they've got some guys that are going to help. Those guys are both rookies in the NFL. Christian Watson, obviously coming back from a little bit of an injury. People think, oh, wow, we solved his hamstring stuff. There was one hamstring. I don't even know. People have said they like magically fixed his hamstrings or whatever. So I'm just going to go with it for this week. The matchup is good. The offense last year was pretty good for wide receivers. And you're looking at all 4 of those guys. Watson, when he was on the field, was able to produce. Jaden Reed was a wide receiver 2 as a rookie. Romeo Doubs, consistently, like 10 to 12 points a game. And then you had Dontavian Wicks, who didn't do anything, but a lot of people are really high on him. And so this is a very good matchup and a very good offense for wide receivers. And then we're looking at the Vegas total points line for the week being at 48.5. And so this projects to be a pretty high-scoring game. This is a Friday night game. And so you've got prime time. It's in Brazil. It's week 1. There are so many factors that are kind of just skewing things in this matchup. I think Christian Watson, I think Jaden Reed, I think they're both good starts, but Christian Watson in particular, again, because he's a guy that you're probably going to be flexing or choosing to flex, definitely flexing him this week. I'd expect a big week from Christian Watson, and when he scores a touchdown, I'm going to feel really good about having him on my fantasy roster.
Yeah, and when you are looking at it contextually, too, I think that A.J. Dillon being out for a significant amount of time, and Marshawn Lloyd being questionable, and James Bradbury, one of the DBs for the Eagles, out for 6 to 8 weeks, I mean, that merits every single one of those receivers in the Packers offense to be a pretty solid starting option or flex option, at least if you need to plug them into your starting lineup. So I'm excited to see what Christian Watson can do week 1 and to see the hype go crazy. Everybody say his hamstrings are fixed. We're good now. He's going to be fine all year. I expect a really solid week from Christian Watson. And the guy that we are going to sit, and this is aggressive, we don't usually tell you to sit guys that are drafted in the first 4 to 5 rounds of your fantasy draft because those are guys that you are expecting to start week in and week out. But if you drafted a rookie in the first few rounds of your fantasy draft, you were aware of the risk. And one of the risky guys to start week 1 is Malik Nabers. You have to at least admit that. And I understand that a lot of people are going to be forced to start Malik Nabers. But if you were able to get a guy like Christian Watson in the later rounds and you just want to sit Malik Nabers week 1, I wouldn't blame you at all because Vegas does not expect this to be a high-scoring game where you've got the Minnesota Vikings with Sam Darnold. That's a total crapshoot. We don't really know. And then you have the New York Giants. The New York Giants, who somehow magically made the playoffs a couple of years ago. They showed their true colors last year. Daniel Jones goes down. Daniel Jones is coming back healthy, and he is not a very great consistent passer. I understand that Malik Nabers down the line is supposed to really elevate that offense, but again, week 1, as a rookie, let's temper the expectations a little bit because I just don't expect this offense to magically be better overnight just because they added Malik Nabers. They have to continue to fix the offensive line. They have to figure out that running game. They have to figure out if Daniel Jones is going to be their long-term option. I mean, if Daniel Jones is awful this year, they could start someone else in the middle of the season. We just don't really know. So week 1, let's be patient. Let's start a guy like Christian Watson. Let's sit Malik Nabers if you can. Another guy that I am going to have you start this week is Jameson Williams. I think that this is another situation very similar to Christian Watson, where he has so much big playability and has such a good outlook for this matchup against the LA Rams that I think there's going to be touchdowns flying all over the place, in the air, on the grounds, you name it. Like if both teams don't score more than 30 points, I'm probably going to be disappointed, honestly. And with Jameson Williams, he's got the matchup green light. He's got the offensive green light. Yes, he's the fifth option in that offense technically, but I think it's going to get as deep as the fifth option getting a touchdown in that offense this week. Vegas expects this to be the highest scoring game of the week. Don't listen to me. Listen to Vegas and listen to what they're saying. You want to get a piece of every member of these offenses for the LA Rams and for the Detroit Lions this week. It's going to be a shootout. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think Jameson Williams, with all the offseason hype that he's been getting, I think you're going to see him really hit the ground running, quite literally, and probably get a big play or two down the field and get a big play touchdown as well.
And a guy that we're sitting this week, we don't want in our starting lineups, is Najee Harris. And Najee wasn't a guy we drafted a ton of this year anyways, but playing the Atlanta Falcons in week 1, the matchup is not super good. The Atlanta Falcons allowed the third least points to running back last year of any fantasy team. They were very good against the run. They were a team last year where if we had running backs playing them, we were like, hey, you might want to consider sitting these guys because they are quite good against the run in fantasy football. And so we're going to sit Najee this week because of that, because the offense obviously projects not to be super good anyways. So when you have a not good offense against a good defense like that, you're probably talking not touchdowns. You're probably talking not receptions. You're probably talking not fantasy points, honestly. And so I really don't trust Najee unless he does score a couple touchdowns this week. Obviously, it's possible. With that being said, I think this is going to be an absolute rock fight in week 1. I definitely don't want him there. And the Vegas line as well sits at 40.5 points total. That's the over-under. I mean, that is a low-scoring game we're talking about. And so, again, when we're talking about rock fights, the last guy I want to rock fight is Najee Harris, is Jaylen Warren. Both those guys are going to be sits, but I highlighted Najee here because I do think that Najee is a guy in particular that a lot of people are going to be tempted to flex just because of where they drafted him. And a lot of people drafted him to be a flex guy, or a lot of people even drafted him to be their starting running back. And whether or not that was the right choice is neither here nor there, because you have him, and this week I wouldn't start him. So I'm definitely gonna sit him. And let's go to Raheem Mostert, who is my start now. Raheem Mostert playing the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 1. The Dolphins pretty much always come out on freaking fire. That's just what they do. Their running backs are going to be on fire. Their wide receivers are going to be on fire. That's just the Miami Dolphins. It's just Mike McDaniel, and he's like a wizard. And so he comes out in week 1. Nobody knows what the frick to do to stop it. And so Achane obviously projects really well this week as well. We have him ranked quite a bit higher. But Mostert is a guy we have ranked like 10 spots higher than projected, because a lot of people are just assuming that Devon Achane's going to come out and dominate the carries, that Raheem Mostert's not going to get as much work, and that what everybody wants and what everybody sees happening if they don't actually pay attention is Devon Achane's going to be the workhorse back and he's going to get all the carries. No, that's not what's going to happen. Raheem Mostert is going to get a fair amount of work this week. He's probably going to score some touchdowns this week. He's probably going to get as much work as Devon Achane. If Devon Achane does end up pulling away, which I'm not even sure I see that just because of the type of player Achane is, if he does do that, though, it's going to be later in the season. For the first couple weeks, Raheem Mostert is a great start. In fact, he's a must start. I've got him in all my lineups in every single league I own him in. Obviously, the matchup against the Jaguars is iffy. I mean, they're not great against the run, but they're not bad against the run. And so it doesn't really make a difference there. He's got a yellow light there. A green light for offense, though, because obviously, again, this projects to be a really efficient offense in week 1. And then the Vegas light, the line sits at 49.5 points, because we both know none of those teams are going to play defense. The Jags aren't going to come out and play defense in week 1. You're not going to see a Doug Peterson team be disciplined. Sorry, hate me, whatever. You're also not going to see the Miami Dolphins play defense. You're just not going to. This is going to be a shootout. We expect it to be a shootout. And in shootouts, I want pieces of both offenses, similar to the Lions and the Rams this week. I want all of those guys on my team. I want them starting, and so I want Raheem Mostert starting this week.
Yeah, we talked about the Vegas line being low for the Pittsburgh game, 40.5. It's even lower for the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints game. And honestly, I would just rather start a guy like Raheem Mostert and sit a receiver who's a number 1 option in his offense, granted, on an offense that's terrible, right? Mm-hmm. With Bryce Young, and I know they could be on the rise this year. They have a better head coach, a better situation. But look, week 1, not expecting much from Diontae Johnson given the matchup. The matchup really is neutral for this situation, right? It's a division rival. You never really know what's going to happen in those games, especially week 1. But look, if anything, Dennis Allen is a pretty good defensive play caller. And I think he's going to be able to get a lot out of his defense early in the year, and they could even start strong. The Saints usually do. And then offensively, again, we don't know. Dave Canales is kind of a wild card in terms of like how productive is this offense going to be this year. It's going to take time regardless, though, for him to implement his system there when it's been so broken the past couple of years. And then, again, I already mentioned that Vegas light. Trust what Vegas is saying about this game, right? It's a disgusting matchup. No one's going to want to watch this game. And I think Diontae Johnson and, you know, if you're big into Xavier Legette starting strong, if you're big into Adam Thielen continuing what he did last year, any one of those guys, that's kind of a last resort start if you're putting them in your flex spot this week. And then a guy that we're really excited to have you start this week is going to be Tony Pollard. They are playing the Chicago Bears, so Matty Eberflus is a pretty good defensive play caller, again, the head coach there. But with Tony Pollard, I trust the running backs in an offense where there's a lot of questions at the quarterback position heading into week one. Even though Will Levis has a year of play in his pocket and has shown that he can provide a lot of passing volume in that offense, this is a completely different system with Brian Callahan now being the head coach there, a totally different offense that he's going to have to learn. I think that they brought in Tony Pollard for a reason and stuck with Tyjae Spears as their second option as well, and they're going to run those guys in week one. I mean, we're high on Calvin Ridley for the entire season, and we're not super expecting Calvin Ridley to do anything wild week one either. Now, would I be shocked out of my mind if Will Levis, threw 30-plus passes in week one and helped D-Hop and Calvin Ridley both produce? No, I wouldn't be shocked out of my mind. I'm just betting that the running backs are going to get a decent amount of usage and kind of protect Will Levis from screwing up the season day one, right? And Vegas is pretty neutral on what they think the production is going to look like, where obviously you've got Caleb Williams on the other side of the ball. We just don't know what's going to happen. The line is 44.5. If you wanted to bet the over for that, I wouldn't blame you at all because there are so many weapons on both sides of the ball there. But the offense, I think, is supposed to be pretty solid with Brian Callahan. That's obviously why they hired him and fired Mike Vrabel. You're going to see a lot of offensive production there, I think, over the course of the entire season. Expect that to be the running backs game week one, where they're both scoring a lot of touchdowns.
And so a guy that I am more comfortable sitting this week, that I think a lot of people are going to be deciding, okay, do I start Zach Moss or do I start Chase Brown? I'm honestly not super comfortable starting either of them this week because I'd really rather wait and see which one of these guys does emerge as the running back one in this offense. With Chase Brown in particular, I think Zach Moss does probably have the starting spot at this point in time.
He starts season strong too, and we've seen that multiple years now.
Exactly. And so Chase Brown is a guy I don't really want to start this week. He's got 2 yellows and a red, and then the context obviously is kind of not a factor here. But this is a team that is playing the New England Patriots. And the Vegas line sits at 41 points for this team, which is really low for when you're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and when you're talking about how high octane of an offense they can be. They're playing the Patriots. The Patriots are good defensively. They have good cornerbacks. They obviously new coaching regime, so we don't know what it's going to be like. But that being said, it does project to be a low-scoring game. The Patriots were average last year against the run while being really good against the pass. So with Chase Brown, again, this is more like the ambiguity behind the situation, and the fact that we don't know who the running back one there is makes me want to flex somebody that I feel like has higher upside this week. We talked about Jameson Williams earlier in this video. We talked about Christian Watson, all those guys. I mean, I would just plug on my flex spots over Chase Brown. But again, Zach Moss, I feel a little bit more comfortable with him. I just don't feel comfortable at all starting Chase Brown in week one. If Chase Brown comes out and he proves that he is the running back one, then obviously moving into week two, we're like, hooray, we can start Chase Brown now. Then we move on, and we can say the rest of the season, we know that Chase Brown's going to be a high receiving upside guy. He's going to be the third down guy, so we can plug him into our lineups. Week one, I'm just a little bit iffy. If you have to start him, do it, obviously. And then the guy we will start is Josh Palmer, despite the fact that he does have yellows pretty much all the way across the board. They are playing the Raiders in week one, and so, the defense, the Raiders obviously aren't going to be bad against wide receivers. Last year they were around 20th, and so it's like, yeah, it's not bad, but it's also not great.
There's nothing keeping them from being productive in the first week of the season, where you have a lot of young guys that are coming up and into their own. And we expect Ladd McConkey to be the number one guy there, but again, we're just tempering our expectations with rookies week one.
And that's exactly what I was going to say right before you said it. Ladd McConkey, obviously a rookie, right? And then you've got Quentin Johnson. Obviously, he's essentially a block of concrete. And so we don't expect anything from him. We don't really expect anything from the tight ends. And what it comes down to with this matchup is, who else is there? Palmer is the experienced veteran in this room, right? And so I would think that Justin Herbert is going to lean on the guy he already has chemistry with before he, establishes some with Ladd McConkey, before he tries to throw Quentin Johnson the ball and he drops it, before again, all new running backs too. Like, Josh Palmer is really the only guy in that offense that Justin Herbert's like, I've played with him. I'm comfortable with him. And so because of that, I'm comfortable flexing him this week. I'll throw in my flex spots. The Vegas line for this one's 42.5 points, so not high, but not astronomically low. It does kind of project. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the Chargers do in week 1 in terms of their run-pass balance as well. Josh Palmer may be flexible the rest of the year if they come out and they actually prove they're going to pass the ball a fair amount. But it is a Greg Roman offense, and it is Jim Harbaugh. We just don't know. And so in week 1, because he is the only guy that Justin Herbert has chemistry with, I'm gonna start him. I think he could have 12 targets in his first game of the year. Whether that happens the rest of the season, I don't know. Definitely comfortable starting him this week, though.
Chuba Hubbard has reds all across the board, literally except context, right? What's the big contextual thing that Chuba has going for him? Jonathan Brooks is on the PUP. Jonathan Brooks is not going to come back until at least week 5, right? And Chuba is the next man up. He is going to be the number 1 guy there, and he has shown in small sample sizes in the past that he can be an explosive running back with some receiving upside as well, dating all the way back to college, right? So some people are very excited about what Chuba could offer. And again, the vacated volume thing, if you own Jonathan Brooks, which a lot of people do, and you own Chuba Hubbard at the same time, which a lot of people do because they wanted to get that handcuff, you're considering starting Chuba Hubbard, right? Especially if you went wide receiver heavy up top, maybe took an elite tight end and elite quarterback, and then you kind of faded running back until the later rounds and you went Brooks and Chuba. Like, this is a situation where you're seriously considering starting Chuba Hubbard. If you are able to not start Chuba, please don't do it. Please don't do it. This matchup is too miserable. I already talked about it. The over-under for this game is 40 total points. And this is not the situation that I want to be a part of, playing against a Dennis Allen defense, which is pretty solid, and a backup level running back who the Panthers drafted over, right? They drafted Jonathan Brooks to replace Chuba, replace everyone in that room, including Miles Sanders last year, who they signed, because it wasn't good enough. I'm not expecting Chuba Hubbard to be good enough week 1. Even though for weeks 2, 3, and 4, it could look different with a different situation, maybe a better defensive matchup. Chuba's not a guy that I'm excited about week 1. I'm not excited about anyone in that offense week 1. So please avoid it at all costs. I don't think the context light and the vacated volume is enough for me to just look over every single red light that's staring me in the face between matchup, offense, and Vegas.
Yeah, and again, these are guys that in week 1, you're not really sure what's going to happen. Nobody is. Week 1 is always crazy. Week 2 is usually crazy. Week 3 and 4 is where you start to get a groove and things get a little bit more predictable. But with that being said, just based on what we've seen here in our analytics, these are guys, again, we're going to start and sit. But let us know if you like this format. Let us know if you like the start-sit content. Do us a huge favor. Drop a like if you do. And make sure you subscribe if you play fantasy football. We're going to give you this tool on the website on flockfantasy.com. I'm going to be posting it here this week. So if you haven't already, sign up with code DOMAIN, choose the annual Mother Flocker tier. You get not only this tool where you can use and look at all of these players on the Start Sit tool, but you can also get a team blueprint for free from us when you use code DOMAIN and you sign up for the annual tier. So you're going to want to use code DOMAIN, sign up for the annual tier, get a free team blueprint, get the Start Sit tool, get our rankings every week, get some other great tools from other creators as well. But make sure, like I said, flockfantasy.com/domain. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you later.